When I lost my job last year, I decided that it was time to dive back into where I have always enjoyed working the most, and that is in the creative arts. Now that is a pretty broad statement, just saying creative arts in general, but this involves areas such as game design, television, film, and music, as well as authoring. What is so exciting is diving back into the creative arts world. I recently released my first book, From Coma to Comma, Taking Back Control of Your Narrative, where I share my testimony and give an overview of 5 key foundations of our life, including our physical, mental, spiritual, professional, and personal health. Even while I was working on my book, I was working on other creative projects as well. I've written several short films that have yet to be produced, I've been working on music projects, and I started working on some game design experimentation in the Unreal Engine. That is where we're going to focus in this video. There is such a large variety of video game options in the world today, it's kind of hard to determine where you want to get started when it comes to getting into game design. Now, I have spent several years experimenting with the idea of doing game design work. I've worked with 3D Game Maker Engine, Unity, and most recently have been exploring and really enjoying working with the Unreal Game Engine. So since I'm pretty dedicated on getting my business up and running and truly being able to just dedicate my life to building a business empire across the media and creative industry, I decided my first major project that I wanted to work on outside of work that I do for clients is in a video game design project. So the question really became, where am I going to start? I know that I want to use the Unreal Engine. I know that I have a lot of learning to do in the Unreal Engine, but where do I truly want to start? Now, I've had a couple of ideas. First, I would love to make a truly decent, original, first-person, story-driven game, because it feels like those just don't exist as well as they used to at one point. Not to say that there aren't plenty to choose from, but I feel like the stories tend to be very repetitive and they don't give you a lot of variety and options. So I wasn't really ready to start working on that game yet, because until I really get a story down that has some originality to it and a nice strong structure to it, there's not a lot that I can really work on other than experimenting with the style of first-person gaming. So instead, I decided to start working on something a little more simple that will end up being the first game release once we determine how it's going to be designed and what all is going to be involved in the story. So I decided that I was going to start experimenting with creating a top-down style game. After several conversations with friends, I decided that I didn't want to just start working on a game that had a unique story. I also wanted it to have kind of a different focus in gameplay. Now, in order to work on a gameplay demo, I first need to understand the Unreal Engine well enough that, well, I can actually start putting together some demos. The cool thing is that there are so many great resources out there that if I have a question about how to do something on the Unreal Engine, I can usually get a general idea of what needs to be done just by searching for it on Google, on the Unreal forums, or on YouTube. And even if their information is outdated, it's not too hard to convert it to understand for the most recent updated version of the engine. So what I've been doing is I started working on programming some different gameplay aspects. Some of them very simple, like being able to scroll your camera to get a wider or closer shot just from a top-down perspective. As you can see, it's kind of clunky, but it at least serves its purpose immediately, obviously wanting to make some more changes to it later on to make it run a little bit smoother. The other thing that I've been experimenting with is, do I like this overall top-down structure for the gameplay idea that I have in mind? I can see a lot of potential to it, but I also see needing to make a lot of modifications to how it works, because what I'm using right now is just a template provided by the Unreal Engine that gives the very basic foundation for a top-down style game. So I started to experiment with the Unreal Engine. What is it capable of? What can it do? How do I do it? Especially because I really got to learn their blueprint platform in order to make a lot of the changes that I've wanted to make. And just when I thought I was getting somewhere and starting to kind of figure out how the overall foundation of the engine works, the project file that I had became corrupted. Now, how it became corrupted is beyond me. All I do know is I remember I hit a button to get it to do some rendering stuff for me. I walked away, and when I came back, there was a massive error message from the engine itself. And in my attempt to reopen the project files, the files could not be opened by the engine anymore. So instead, what I ended up doing was deleting the original project files and starting over from the same template that I started with before. But this time I decided to take a little bit of a different approach. I know that my environment for this gameplay demo needs to be able to be very interactive, meaning that items that are laying around need to be able to be usable in different ways across the game. And I don't want to go too much into detail about the gameplay aspect itself because honestly it hasn't been completely solidified since we're just experimenting with it. But I do know that when it comes to the environment, a lot of stuff needs to be able to be interacted with in almost a ragdoll style, but not necessarily only a ragdoll style. As we move further along in the design process, you guys will kind of understand what I'm saying. This time, with new project files, I decided to work on building a test environment rather than just starting to work on programming the gameplay aspect. Because if the environment needs to be interactive, well, then we need an environment that can be interacted with. But of course, this meant that I needed to start learning another aspect of the Unreal Engine, because environmental design is not something I am overly familiar with, and that means I'm learning a whole new area, and not just learning a whole new area in general, but learning how to do it in an engine that I'm not familiar with the tools for environmental design in. In the process of trying to figure this out, I ran into another problem where my computer just simply doesn't have the power to use some of the tools that the Unreal Engine has. And I knew that this was a problem that I would probably come across several times while working on this, so I've had to go and figure out alternative ways to do the same thing that I wanted to do but with different tools and resources in order to be able to do it on this smaller scale. And I'm aware that I'm going to have to upgrade some hardware in order to do it the way that I really want to do it in the future. So for right now, this is where I'm at. I'm working on the environment design. I have the basic top-down system in place. I do not have the ability to scroll the camera in and out at this point, but I did widen the shot so I could see a little bit more when running around testing everything. I'll still introduce being able to scroll the camera back and forth later on, but if I'm going to do it a second time, I really just want to be able to make it run smoother right away rather than it being clunky again. Once I finish getting this basic environment that's for testing design, because let me promise you, it's not going to look super pretty, but I'm not worried about it looking pretty since this is just for a gameplay test demo. Once this is done, then that is when I'll really start to jump into getting the programming behind how the gameplay elements are going to work put together. So for now, that is where we're at. We're at the very beginning. The beginning of hopefully what will be a great future game, but that's to be determined since we're just getting things tested out. If you guys want to see continuous updates on this project, please take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share on my YouTube channel. For now, for this gameplay demo project, all of the updates and the dev vlogs are going to be posted right here on my YouTube channel. If the project ends up getting green lit and going to my studio for being full-on production, then it'll probably get transitioned into a new devlog style posted on the hopefully soon to be released YouTube channel for the studio itself.